Hey everyone, it's Jason. So today I'm going to go over the Arkham Horror card game. It's a living card game by Fantasy Flight. There will be unboxing videos for this and all the sets coming out, but to get started off, I'm just going to kind of do a brief overview of what the game is, sort of how it's played. I don't want to get into too many necessarily spoilers of the story, but that's what this video is. It's not going to maybe be 100% exactly how to play. If you really want one, Fantasy Flight themselves do a good one. This should just be a quick, brief idea of, this is the mechanics they do. I'm not going to dive into every single aspect of it. But what the, start of what's Arkham Horror is, it's based off of, Eldritch Horror, Cthulhu mythology, back in the 20s. So the story takes place in the town of Arkham. And you have all these different odd things that are happening. They could be supernatural, different dimensional, alien, demons, any sort of different horror thing that could be coming up. And it takes place in say the 20s. It's a much more simpler times, like the gangsters, the flappers during Prohibition. So you're not gonna have your characters or your cards and the stuff in the game. You're not gonna have people pulling out cell phones and driving fancy cars and having super weapons and stuff. So it makes gameplay limited. Like when you have a gun that can only shoot X number of bullets instead of I have a guy with a laser gun. It's gonna make a difference. And what you do in the game is you play through a story. And you can play standalone stories each. This is the base game, which you have to play any of the games. And then they have a bunch of other expansions you can buy. You can play most of the expansions by themselves. Each new storyline. This is this. I don't know if it says on here. It doesn't. This storyline starts off as called The Night of the Zealot. And the next big story is called The Dunwich Legacy. And there's a big box that starts each story, and there's a bunch of little small tiny expansions you can buy that keep continuing on that story. But you can play any of the stories themselves as long as you have the big box, because they use cards from each one, and they all use cards from the base deck, so you have to have the base game. But there's 3 different stories in here that you can play, and you can play them in any order. You can play them as a campaign, which is one of the other things this game does, is let you start with your characters, you play through, and then you suffer things, you discover things, and then the next story will actually draw from that, which makes it really interesting. Because it could be my health was low because I got hurt too much, so that's going to affect what happens in your next game or what you might do. But you also might solve part of a mystery, and that'll give you a benefit or whatever in the next part of the story. So that's kind of cool. You can play them as an ongoing scenario, as well as upgrade your cards in your deck. This is a card game. So there's going to be all these different types of cards. A bunch of different cards. So, and I'm not going to spend too much time going through all of them, because again, I don't want to spoil all the stuff and all the stories. Like I said, I will do an unboxing video as well, so you can check that out. And that will actually have the actual spoilers. So I'm going to go through different card types. And this is the very first campaign, so there is going to be some mild spoilers on things that'll come up, or the cards and monsters and stuff like that. But if you're going to play the game, you're going to run into them fairly quickly anyhow. So every game starts off with these 2 types of cards, and they form a book, which is really cool. So you have the agenda. This is essentially the basis of the story and the bad stuff that's happening. And it's going to have this doom counter down here, or doom tracker. So every turn, you place a doom counter on this card. And if it hits that number, then you flip it over, and something happens, and it tells you what you're going to do. So you're going to do this, and you're going to move on to, the next, onto the next agenda. And if all the agendas, and some of the games and scenarios have 2, some have 4, and that also makes this interesting, is not the core gameplay is the same for every single story. What you have to, like the idea of how you play the game, but what happens, how long it is, what you need to be doing is different for every game, which makes it really fun. But yeah, this advances every turn, and other things in the story can advance it quicker, and if that advances too fast, you lose the game. So you're on a constant time limit. On the other hand, you have an act, and this has some clue tokens, and this is your investigators, which are what your players are called, are trying to find clues at your various locations, which we'll show you in a minute. And they find enough, it's 2, and that little symbol that means per player. So if you're playing 2-player game, you need 4 of them. If you're playing a 4-player game, you need 8 of them. And then once you solve that, then you flip this one over, and it'll give you a bunch of different stuff, and it'll tell you what to be doing. So it's like, put this card away, put this, do that. And it sets you up for the next part of you continuing your investigation. And again, some of the games have 2 acts, some have 4 acts. And what's also really neat is some of the games have multiple branching pathways, so that might have Act 1, here, and then Act 1 here. So depending on, or like Act 1, but like Act 2 will split off into 2 different ones depending on what you did. Maybe you made a choice like, hey, did you rescue this person? Or did you even talk to this person? Did you find this character in the deck before you continued? Then you take choice A. If you didn't, you take choice B. And it kind of helps you because then there's a little bit more replayability there. And then they keep advancing. So like this first one here has 3 different agendas, and the next one costs 7, and the last one costs 10. So effectively, you have generally about 20 turns to beat this game. But it puts you on a time limit, and then it's going to tell you what happens, and like what you write down for your campaign. And then the same here, you have 3 different acts. And like this one has 3 per player. Then this one actually just has a special one. It's because there's something specific you have to do. Defeat the Ghoul Priest. So you have a different agenda to do. So that's really cool there. The next thing we're going to get are locations. Oh, yeah, I'll get that one in a minute. So we start off with, so like this game, we start off with the study. And just to break down some of the stuff on this card. Obviously the name. Oop. So we start with this side. So we're going to first start side. I always have a little lock on the top. And that's just where you start with any location until a investigator, your player, moves to that location. And then you flip it over and reveal stuff. So right now, so the game starts with this study face down. And then once you start the game, you flip it up and it adds stuff. There could be effects that happen, different things. And it's also going to have a couple of different things here. So every game has a little set icon. You can see that they have them here too. So this is called The Gathering. This is the name of this story. And then when you're setting up the game, it's going to tell you start with this scenario or this story. And then there's other encounter decks that you add in there, which are going to have different symbols and they're going to change up. So like one of them is the rats. So you'll put rats in this deck, but then you could play another game and you'll also have the rats. So there's some of them decks repeat themselves because there's only a couple of cards. But yeah, that's how you kind of sort it out. That way you're not just randomly trying to mix and match or read stuff. Other things on here is it's going to have your clues. So when you come into play, it puts 2 clue tokens per player. And you notice the first event to complete, you needed 2 per player. So you have to clean all the events out of the study, discover what you can before you can move on. And it has a shroud number of 2. So this is for when you're trying to actually find clues or investigate. You have to match your character's investigating skills, their knowledge skill, against this room. And it's against this too. And then there's some chaos tokens and stuff too. And I'll get into that in a little bit later when I get to the characters. But that's how you figure out clues and stuff. And all your characters use various skills. And then on the bottom there's these little empty circles and there's a little symbol on the top. So what happens is in some of these, you're going to reveal other locations. So we're going to have, I got this one backwards. We have like a parlor, a hallway, a cellar, and an attic. These are all the lock sides. You can see there's nothing special, but they all have these little symbols up in the corner, and then at the bottom they have another little symbol. So like the hallway has the red with the square in it, and then it has the triangle, the plus, and the diamond, which are the other three. So what it's saying is the hallway lays in the center of the table. So flip this down a bit. It'll lay in the center of the table, and then the other rooms will all be connected to it. So then your investigators have to move from room to room, but they have to cross back into the hallway to go to the cellar, cross back to the parlor. So if they clean out one area, they find all the clues, they have to then go to the next area. So it kind of makes it like a little board game as well. And in this particular scenario, you're inside this house. And there's a study, the attic. One of the other ones in there, you're playing in Arkham Woods. So you're discovering different parts of the forest in the woods. There's some other various scenarios in some of the later games, like where you're exploring a museum. Like you're actually inside a museum, going to different rooms. One of them, you're on a train, and you have to move through the train. So that also makes this game neat. It's not like it's always just like, oh, I'm discovering a haunted house type of thing. There's all different stuff. So you flip these over, and they're going to give various stuff. Some of these have 0 clues. Some have 2 clue tokens. They have different shroud numbers. That's a little black one. They also have different effects on there, too. So like the hallway doesn't have anything special. You're here. You're going to need to go somewhere else. But you get to the cellar, and it has a forced ability. When you enter the cellar, you take a point of damage, no matter what. And if you enter the attic, you take a horror. And then in the parlor, you can do a resign ability, such these little arrows are abilities. And it says, this is too much for me. You run out the front door fleeing in panic. So you can basically choose to give up if you want. And that also works with this being a campaign. Because there are times when you're just like, okay, my choice is do I keep trying to progress forward and see if I can beat this game, or do I give up where I'm at and end this game, be like, my character's gonna die if I keep doing this. Either they're gonna die because they took too much damage, or they're gonna go insane because they have a sanity meter, and you can basically quit the story, and then you can move on to the next one, and there's gonna be consequences for if you complete it or if you didn't complete it or what you got done. But sometimes it's outweighing the factors, because if you go insane or die, then you can't play the next campaign in that role. Like, you have to start completely over. So there's different things. There's like Parlay, which is a test. So this is like test knowledge for 4. If you succeed, take control of Lita Chandler. So this is a character in the game. It's one of the extra cards. But that's one of the skill challenges you do, is you have to play against your character and see what they do. The other thing on here is like some of these have victory points, and this goes later towards things in the campaign and earning experience points. Your character gets better. So the one other thing it's part of the story is at the beginning. This is the gathering. I probably should have showed this first, but this is the easy standard mode. So while you're drawing the game for your skill tokens, there's going to be these 3 tokens are in there as well. And if you draw one, this is the various stuff it's going to do. But if you choose to play on the harder expert mode, they do worse things. So like this middle one says, you get -1 to the skill point. If you fail, you take a horror. So that makes you go insane a little bit quicker. But if you play hard expert, reveal another token. If you fail, take 2 horror. So it could potentially be better or worse because you draw a second token, but you're also going to take more damage if you do it. So it's kind of fun. It also gives you extra difficulty levels. Let's look at the 2 other types of cards that are in the decks. So these are encounter decks. They're going to have these special backs on there. And this is a deck you make up so while you're exploring the locations, you're going to have to draw one of these every turn, and they're stuff that are going to come up to affect you. So these particular ones are enemies, and you can see they have a bunch of different effects on there. So they're going to have their name, of course. They're going to have their attacks. This is how much damage they're going to do to you every turn that you're in the same room as them, and you don't get away or you don't defeat them. The middle one is their health. That's how much damage you have to do to them to defeat them. And then the last one over here, the little foot, that's your escape amount. So if the monster's in the same room as you, the enemy, this particular one's a humanoid monster ghoul, and they have keywords that are referenced throughout the game. If you can't get away from him, you have to try and do a skill test against that. And if you can't get away, then he's still attacking you. And then this guy, he has special abilities, spawns in the cellar. And then down here is how much damage he does do. So if he hits you, he's going to do, every turn, he's going to do 2 health damage and 1 mental damage to you. What also makes this game interesting for that fact is if one of the enemies is in the same room as your investigator, they're engaged with you, your options are now limited because you're standing in the same room as someone that's trying to hurt you or whatever. So you basically either have to fight it or you have to try and evade it. If you fight it and defeat it, great, it's done. Or you can evade it, basically then you're far enough away from it that now you can continue your turn because you only have so many actions per turn you can take. Otherwise, if you just decide, no, I really need to do this action, then the monster's going to take a free hit at you. Because it's like if you're standing there and he's standing there next to you trying to grab you or hit you or attack you or whatever, and you're like, no, I'm going to look in this desk for these clues, he's going to hit you because you're busy doing something else. But sometimes it's a gamble you have to take. You're like, is it more important for me to try and do this, or me trying to just move to another location or do something else versus dealing with this monster? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So here's a couple different ones. And again, you're going to have other encounters in here. Like I said, the rats will add another different one. Add more things. The other type of card that wasn't in that one this is from a different encounter set. I believe this is from the Devourer Below, but this is called a Treachery. So you're going to have, these are kind of like one-time effects where a monster or an enemy card will stay on the table in the room trying to hurt your investigators. These come in, they do something. So it says Revelation, you test the might or the mind stat for 5. For each point you fail by, you must either choose one. Choose to discard a card from your hand or take 1 damage and 1 horror. So basically, if you have one of the characters as high intelligence, you're probably going to do this just fine. If you're playing one of the characters as low intelligence, you're probably going to get hurt by this. But that's, again, it's sort of them gambles that happen. It's a mystery type game. You don't know what's going to go on. Alright, then let's look at our investigators quick. Alright, so you have 5 different classes of investigators. You're going to have, and the base game starts with them, and then each other game, big box set adds at least 5 more, 1 for each class type. And they're going to be based on, they're going to have various stats, they're going to use various cards in their decks, plus everyone's going to have their own way to build a deck. So they're all going to be different. So you can't just take, make one deck and just change a different investigator out each time. You have to build the decks differently because they're different people. So here, like we have, and we're going to look at the stats for this. This is a Guardian. Guardians represent, like he's a Fed, so he's like the cops, but they represent cops, protectors, people that are putting themselves into these, like, coming to Arkham, trying to, like, protect people or solve a crime, that type of stuff. So they're going to generally have, they have 4 skills. They have mental, knowledge, and now I'm going to say that, and I don't remember what these symbols mean. So we'll just look at the book here, so I'm not, so we have willpower, intellect, combat, agility, and wild. So willpower is kind of just like your ability to resist the craziness, just going around in your sanity. Intellect is your book smarts. Combat, how much damage you can do, and agility is how fast you can escape and move around. So, like, being the Guardian, he's going to have a lot more attack. because he's big guy. And he has fairly good knowledge, but he's not as fast because he's a bigger guy. And then he has his special ability he can use. So every investigator has their own special ability, which says after you defeat an enemy, discover one clue at your location. So where discovering clues takes knowledge, and he only has 3, but he has 4, so he can probably take guys out. He has cards in his deck for dealing damage faster. But that's how he can discover clues even quicker, by taking out enemies, getting rid of threats. So he can be focused on that, while one of the other smarter characters can be trying to find clues using their knowledge skills. And then they have this little star here, which all the characters have. So if you draw this from the deck, or draw this when you're doing a test, you get this extra effect. So they're kind of like the positive ones in the little bag. So you get +1 for each clue at your location. So basically, if you haven't solved a lot of clues yet, he can get a lot stronger, or he can discover things more. So now if we flip it over, it's going to show so much. A little backstory about him, which is really cool. Deck size, how many cards, deck building options. You can have any of the Guardian cards from level 0 to 5, and I'll explain what the level is when I show off some of those. Seeker cards, which is one of the other classes, from level 1 to 2, and then neutral cards, level 1 to 5. So all of the base game characters have the same idea. Their class, they can have any up to level 5. You start the game with all level 0 abilities, and as you play through the campaign, you earn experience for doing stuff in there, defeating enemies, solving clues, things like that. And at the end of each story, you spend those clues, or you spend that experience to get better cards. Some of them are brand new things, some of them are upgraded versions, which is really neat too, because then you kind of have an option. And then they'll have a secondary one where they can only get up to level 2, so they're like their secondary. Versus some of the other expansions. So if I just grab this other random guy here, we have Norman Withers. So he has Seeker cards of level 0 only. Even though he's a Seeker class, he can only use cards of 0. He can have Mystic cards from level 1 to 5. So he can't use the basic Mystic cards, only the little bit better ones. Neutral to level 0, and then up to 5 Mystic cards at level 0. So you can have 5 of them. Versus one of these guys who can have an unlimited amount. So it gives him a different deck building options. You have to kind of play around with what you want to do. The other thing they also have is they have every character has at minimum at least 2 special cards. They have basically a good card, a bad card, and then they have to have a special weakness card, which I'll show you what the weaknesses are in a minute. So it also makes every deck just a little bit different, because every character will always have a couple of cards that are unique to them. So let's check out the other characters. You have the Seeker, who are the knowledgeable guys, the mental. And you can see her stats. She has 5, 3, 2, and 2. It says you may take an additional action this turn, which can only be used tome abilities. And that's a special type of card that you can get. It's various books. And in effect, it'd be +0. But if you succeed, draw 1 card for each tome you control. And at the bottom of the card, you can see they have a little heart and a little brain. That's their health and their sanity. You can see these two, the Feg and the knowledge, are exact opposite. So she can take a lot more mental damage, but she can only get hit so many times, and he's the exact opposite. Just to also show a comparison, so we had our other Seeker we were looking at before. He has a 6 and an 8. So he's a little bit stronger, maybe because he's a guy, older guy maybe, but he's not as smart. He can't take as much mental damage, maybe again, because he's an older gentleman. Who knows? It's how the character was. It's different. Plus his stats are different. So they both have 5 in knowledge, but he loses 1 speed, again, possibly because he's an older guy, just looking at the picture, so he can't move as fast. But he has a lot more willpower to resist stuff. So that's also the differences between some of these characters. Alright, then we have the Mystics. These are sorcerers, magic, people that use magic and trickery. And she has more willpower. That's her stat, and she has other stuff. So it's like after 1 or more horror is placed on Agnes, Deal 1 damage to an enemy or location. For each horror on her, she get +1. So basically, as she takes more sanity damage, she becomes stronger. So it's kind of a neat little effect. We have rogues, who are the ex-cons. He's an ex-con, but they're kind of like the gamblers, the mobsters, the seedy underworld of, again, we're in the 1920s, so, they're those guys. There's, the moonshine runners, the club runners, stuff like that. So you have Skids O'Toole, who get mixed up in this stuff, too. So, the cop kind of maybe came to solve the crime of something happening. The Seeker here is a librarian. She's probably trying to discover the ancient texts, or the sounds she heard, or who are these creatures. The mystics are, possibly involved in it somehow, or have some sort of connection to it. Maybe were touched by something evil or cosmic, or their family dived into it. The rogues are kind of the people probably running around the town, causing trouble and getting into stuff because maybe they unlocked the secrets because they're trying to find do something different, or who knows. You can see he has a lot more he's a lot faster than everybody. During your turn, spend 2 resources. You may take an additional action this turn. That's kind of neat. You can spend to do an extra thing. You can gain his resources back. And then finally, we have the Survivor. So the Survivor class are your everyday, ordinary people who are not purposely getting involved in this stuff. So like I said, the cop is trying to do it. The Seekers are trying to learn about the stuff. The Mystics are probably involved. The Rogues are probably doing something seedy that maybe involves this, or they started it, or they got caught up in it that way. The Survivors are they're like the people that are just around the town that don't know what's going on, but all of a sudden they happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So their stats kind of can vary a lot more, because she has lots of willpower. She has no fighting, because she looks like she's a little younger girl. And that's kind of how that is. So that's kind of neat. 5 different characters, you get some different classes. And then here's just 2 quick examples, or a couple quick examples of their skills. So each one will have skills of their different classes. So you're going to have various things. So if you look closer at some of these cards, you can see some different stuff. So we're going to have their class type, which is also the border. The cost. So you have various resources, points to spend each turn. You gain more every turn. Other cards can give you more. So they cost a little bit more. More or less, depending on if there's something that stays in play, like an asset card will stay in play and then you can use it when you need to, or if it's a event card, a little bit cheaper, just because you play it and it goes away. They're also going to have keywords that do different stuff. They have these little skill points over here for committing. So when you go to perform a test, so if you're trying to discover a clue, like in that study from in the beginning, you had to have at least 2 points. So if I was using, this is a rogue card, so we'll look at Skids O'Toole here. So if he was trying to complete that that investigator clue in the study, he would match his 3 against 2, which means he would win. Except then you have to pull from this pool of tokens, which can have +1, I think it's like a +1, +2, but then you can have a bunch of negative numbers too. You can have other bad things that can happen. So you might want to, for sure, make sure you win, especially because he has, he could potentially, if he draws that token, he could gain 2 more. So you can always commit cards to your turn. So instead of playing this and using this effect, you could play it and use these to gain a bonus in each of those skills. So if he either needs to attack an enemy using his attack skill and he wants an extra 1, which he only has 3, or if he needs his knowledge. So this gives him a boost. So you have alternate ways of using both types of cards, which is really fun. Even like the gun here, you can use it for speed. Or we have a tome here, which we talked about, which you can use for fighting. And then some of them have various effects, like, do this and then perform a skill. This just does 2 damage. Then this has, like, ammo on it, so that you put 4 counters, and then you spend 1 to fight. So you fight a bad guy, you get +1 damage for the attack, so you become a little bit stronger. Plus it deals an additional damage, so actually you can do 2 damage to a character. The other thing we're going to see is on these, they have different symbols for slots for, like, hands and stuff. Because there's cards like this. This is a neutral card, so it can go in any deck. And this one has armor. And it's because there's various items your characters can, essentially equip, like an RPG type game. But you only have 2 hands worth of items. You have body you can wear. There is things for, like, relics. You can have, like, 2 different relics. There's arcane stuff, so if you have magical items, you can have, like, 1 of those. So you're limited on what you can be carrying around, because this isn't, Zelda or Final Fantasy RPG where you can't carry thousands of items. These are real people who can only carry what they carry, and usually they're in the thick of the middle of this story or investigation, so they're not running back to their house or their hideout or the hotel or wherever and grabbing more items. They don't have a giant backpack, with 4 different guns in there, so they're kind of limited to what they can have on their person. And then even then, you don't always have it right away. Sometimes you have to find it first. And then like this, when you put this on, it gives an extra 4 health. So that's, some of the equipment does that as well. The other type of card, are skills. So these are 2 more generic ones. These are skills. They don't have a cost up there because they can't be played for anything other than committing to a skill. But they give extra benefits. So if you commit this and you succeed, you draw a card. If you succeed on this one, you also draw a card. So, but these are basic ones. There are ones that are specific to the character classes as well. But yeah, they usually give you extra bonuses just for committing them, but that's all you can do with them. 2 other types of cards we have, if I can pick them up. So here's an event. So it's at 1-time use, but this is one of the spells I was talking about for a mystic. So spell is just a keyword type, so another card might reference it later, but in general, this doesn't play any different than another thing, but it has fast. So when you play a card, draw a non-weakness Treachery card. Or play when you draw a non-weakness Treachery card. So if I drew one of the monsters, or not the monsters, but that Treachery one, if I draw one of these cards, I can play this event, I can cancel it, and I can take 1 horror. So it could be definitely beneficial. Take that mental damage versus having to deal with that. Then this also has a random icon, so it just adds 1 of any type that you need. So if you're trying to do a mental test or a physical test, you can do that. There are also allies you can get, who are assets, which are items that come into play. This is Leo DeLuca. He's a gangster. So he comes into play. You have an ally. He has 2 health, 2 sanity. Lets you do stuff. If he's in the same when he's always in the same location as you, if you get attacked by an enemy, you can send the damage to him instead, or give him the horror. So you could basically do this and then give him the 1 horror, and you save yourself, sacrificing your opponents or your teammates. Just another interesting card type. The other thing I wanted to show off for the character cards were the skills. So here we have the Seeker's Magnifying Glass. It's a tool that comes into play. You get +1 knowledge while investigating. So as long as you're investigating, you gain +1 knowledge. That's definitely helpful. Then later on, you can see there's a little up here. It has a little pip in this circle. That means it costs 1 experience point, and you can upgrade this card. And again, there are some that are just brand new cards. So it's like ones that you don't have any access to anywhere else. Other ones are upgraded versions. So this upgrades the magnifying glass. So basically, your deck size has to stay the same. So at 30 cards, if you buy a new card, you have to get rid of something. So you could get rid of this magnifying glass and buy this other one. And why would you want to do that? It costs free. instead of costing 1, so you can't argue with that. You still get your +1 for investigating, but you also get this ability. If there are no clues in your location, return magnifying glass to your hand. So basically, if you're done investigating and there's nothing else for you to do, you could put it back in your hand, and then you can always use it for your knowledge skill for something else. And since it's free, you can play it whenever you need to. Or maybe you want to have more cards in your hand for some reason, or you don't want to risk losing it because it's on the table. So that's actually kind of cool there. And there's some cards are upgrades, and some are included in the base game. There's that's an upgrade right in the base game. There are other ones that it's like you buy 3 sets later, and there's upgrades for cards from the first set. And some of them there's multiple upgrades. That's really cool. Some of them reduce the cost, some just add new abilities, some do both. The last card type we have are Treachery cards, but these are they're weaknesses. And again, there's some that the characters have when they start the game, and then there's basic ones which you have a stack of them. Every time you buy a new set, they usually introduce at least 1 or 2 more. You keep shuffling them in, and you keep making one big deck. So you never know from every game you have. You don't know what weaknesses you're going to get. But you play these, and then this is Revelation. Choosing discard all but 1 card from your hand. So it really sucks. It basically kills your turn for you. And then you have to try and build your hand back up. So that's just another little hindrance besides all the monsters and all the other nastiness out there. Look at some of these tokens here. I'm not going to take them all out of my little bins here. Well, I guess I'll have to. So we have tokens for health, little hearts. There's some bigger ones here that have 3s on them. If I can grab one. That's just to keep track of your health. We're going to have the ones for mental, or sanity. So we got little brains. We have some little crates here for resources. These are the tokens you just spend every time it says spend resources. We have the clue/doom tokens. So the green sides are clues, a little magnifying glass. And then you flip them over, and the back sides are your doom tokens, which you use to solve your agendas or your acts. And it's nice that they just made them opposite, because that way you can just grab whatever you want. And then the last ones we have are all our ones you grab from your chaos bag. So you can get these little tokens here that are going to have -1s, -3s, there's -2s, bunch of different ones there. We kind of looked at this at the gathering card. These are some of the other ones you're going to include, which are going to have various effects per game. Every game's going to, because of that initial card, that gathering card, which I don't know where I set that, otherwise I'd pull it back out. Is you're going to have different effects based on each game. There's positives in here. There's some +1s, some 0s. There's also the really bad token and the really good token. So all the other ones will have various effects that will hurt you or do different stuff. Essentially, if you draw this red one, which is these tentacles, really bad stuff is going to happen every time, no matter what. If you draw the blue one, which I don't remember what name this is. I want to say it's the Rylith token, but I very well could be wrong. This will be a positive one, and it'll trigger the effects on your investigator. So, when you draw one of them, you get to do this special effect. And other cards will deal with that stuff as well. So that's the different card types. That's the basis of the gameplay. I'm going to zoom back out. So, also, my camera froze. Come on, camera. So they have a nice little learn to play guide here. Like I said, if you want really in-depth on how to play, go watch the tutorial from Fantasy Flight. It's better than anything I'm going to do. But here it just shows off all the different cards, your different scenarios, all that. Explains to you how to play stuff. You gather different sets for that. Set up the game. And then here you're going to set up your Chaos Bag. And it's going to show you what tokens you start with. So you get, so like for this first scenario for like your base game, you're going to have a couple of pluses. You're only going up to -4. Not too many super terrible things. It doesn't even look like it has a really, really bad token, unless it's that last one. It's probably that last one. But you can get harder and harder. And then this kind of explains on how to do the skill tests, all that stuff. And then this thing I wanted to show off is during your turn, each investigator takes their own separate little turn. I also forgot to point out, because of the board game aspect, you get these little character cards, which are kind of cool. It just shows your character moving around the board, so you know which room you're in. And then they flip over to a black and white side, so when your turn is done, so if Agent Roland goes first, and then he gets done with his turn, does everything, he flips his card over, so that every other player knows that he's done taking turns. Then Wendy can go. That way you're just not trying to remember, oh, did I have more actions to do, or what? Yeah, but each investigator has 3 actions during your turn. So there are various things you can do. You can draw a card, rebuild up your hand so you have more stuff to do. Gain a resource. You could draw 3 cards. You could gain 3 resources. You draw 2 cards, gain 1 resource. You can do any number of these. You can activate an action trigger ability. You can engage an enemy at your location. So sometimes enemies aren't engaged with you. They're not currently trying to attack you. So you can choose to engage with them so that then you can attack them. And why would you want to engage it? It could be because, like, again, if you're playing like Roland and Wendy, maybe Roland the cop wants to engage one of the enemies, so it's focused on him because he can take more damage or he can deal more damage and not hurt Wendy because maybe she's hurting or whatever. Or if there's like a seeker in there, they can keep looking for clues while he's dealing with it. So that's one reason why you might actively choose to engage an enemy. Investigate for clues, move to a new location, play your cards, attempt to invade an engaged enemy, so this is trying to get away so you're not engaged with them, or fight an enemy. So, just up here to explain, if you do anything other, if you're engaged, you do anything other than trying to fight or evade, or activate ability that says either parlay or resign. Parlay is basically kind of like pleading type thing, and resign is before like giving up. Then they get an automatic hit on you. So you kind of really have to debate, like, is it worth taking that hit or not? Investigating, invading, moving, playing cards, fighting. There's your different slots. 1 body, hands, 2 hands, arcane, double arcane. And they did add some more later on in the games, because they add some new card types. Doing all your damage. This is a really good guide explaining how everything works. Explains how to customize, build your deck. All that stuff. Here's the different starter decks. And there's some different keywords for various things that happen. Then also what comes with this game is a rules reference. So in case you didn't think I went over enough, or I went over too much, this is a giant book that explains every single thing. Here's how triggered abilities work. Here's how attaching something works. What base value means. What attack excess means. How to play a campaign. Chaos tokens. So like here we have the various chaos tokens. Those 4 revealed. They do stuff. The red one's an auto fail. You automatically fail the test. The star one, you gain a special ability. Yeah, this explains it. If there's anything you probably wanted to know, it probably explains it in this book here. Defeating, enemy engagement, what the word exception means, what are qualifiers, what's a prey, what's a printed card, And then even beyond all that, here's action timing gameplays. It literally explains how to go through a turn, which is really cool. I'm going to see if I can... So, this is basically your essential turn. You do your Mythos base, place your Doom counter, check the Doom. Does it flip to the next card or not? Each player draws an Investigator card encounter. Now the player has a chance to play cards. They can do stuff if they can. Then you Mythos phase ends. You start your next phase. Phase begins. Players have the option to use these types of abilities. Nope. Alright, then it's the first player's turn. They can play all their cards. Do whatever they need to do. Someone can interject and do something with that. Now the active player takes all their turns, does everything. If he's taking their full turn, they move on to the next step, and they end the phase. Or the next player goes, and then they keep going. Otherwise, they keep going back. Yeah, it's like a nice little flow chart for explaining how all this stuff works. Which is really handy if you just are ever not for sure when you may be able to do stuff. And I'm sure they miss stuff. It happens. Setting up your game, how to do all that stuff. Great explanation on what all the different things on the cards mean. That is all of that. And then there was... So that's your two different books that come with. That's the basis of the game. That is Arkham Horror. Again, this isn't like sit down, I didn't walk you through how to play every turn. I just wanted to show off what the game was, what it's like. I know it's a long video to explain all that. But at least now if you're like, what's Arkham Horror? What's this like? You can kind of see. It's a mystery board game. You're trying to figure out what's going on. You're trying to figure out clues using various investigators. Various locations. There's campaign place. You can keep running through a giant story. And when you start a new story, you can pick brand new characters, start over. Generally, I don't think they expect you to go from one campaign to the other continuing, because your characters get hurt and damaged so much every time that by the time you got to the next one, you'd be too beaten down and you die quick, and then you'd have to start with a new character in the middle of a campaign, which would be really hard because they're designed to build up over time. Or kind of also be, if you played through like 2 campaigns and you start a third one and you've been building up for 2 campaigns, your character's probably OP for the beginning missions, and you're just going to dominate stuff, and then it's not going to be as fun either. But yeah, there's different levels of difficulty you can play, like when you're selecting, and it says in here when you're, is there a map in there? So when you're starting to play, you can select a different number of tokens. Maybe it doesn't tell me in this one. Yeah, there's various amounts of tokens you can choose to play, depending on how difficult you want it to be. Them chaos tokens. I think here they just tell you to do the base one. But yeah, you can do different stuff. It's a really fun, interesting game. It's not super easy. It is kind of puzzly to an extent as well. Because you have to figure out what's the best route to take per player. It's like there's a layout of the game at the beginning. Yeah. So, yeah, check it out. Check out all my videos for the unboxings of stuff as I get them. I don't own a ton as of yet, but I'm going to hopefully keep buying them. Just remember, there will be spoilers in all of them. If you don't want